So, I mean, it's not immediate.
Yeah, yeah.
That was on the right by your place. Looking at, standing in your mud.
I just sent the picture before I left. So that's the way it's called. I don't know what to call it, but that's about 10 inches. And I mean, you know, it's raining now. I mean, it's Thursday. We remember being constructed too, but I don't know if there was any.
Oh, wait, it's time. I gotta do it.
Oh, okay. Hey, they don't pay attention.
This is yours.
All right.
Not as attention somewhere else. That's kind of like the start.
Okay, everybody, let's have a seat. We're about to start. So you have a seat, please. Okay, calling to order the South Maui Community Plan Advisory Committee at 5:30 p.m. And can we start with a roll call?
Chair Rob Wilman, Vice Chair Daniel Kanahele, Tova Callender, Everett Dowling, Lehuan Nani Huddleston Haboka, Vernon Kalani Kau, Randall Leach, Mike Moran, Cody Nemeth, Wee Nishiki, Hioki Paltzer, Jennifer Sullivan, Brian Ward.
Let the record show that all members are present.
Thank you. Full house. Divina mai na lala ke komike o lalo a o kaya unu ka papa ho lala. Na maui hama. Divina mai na hoi e ka po e o ke ena ho lala ke halana o maui. Me ka lahu lahu maui ne. E ho alohe anana ka ko i ke kahi ho i ke na Daniel House e piriani i ke ano permaculture. Ho mo ka ko e ke kuka ana i na i kamahana no ka ho pona pona ana i ka vai. So today we will have a presentation by Daniel Halsey of United Designers on permaculture techniques for watershed management. And after that we'll have public testimony on the topic of watershed management with a limit of 3 minutes each. And welcome to our presenters, United Designers.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. Okay. Very good, thank you. Hi, my name is Daniel Halsey, and this is Sylvia Jordanova, and we are with United Designers. Thank you for having us visit you today and do a presentation about our work and how we work with watershed management and permaculture, ecological design. We help communities and organizations basically save their resources and restore their natural capital and their ecological systems. I've been doing this for about 20 years. United Designers was started to build teams of designers, and now we have a cooperative, and Sylvia is one of our members in United Designers. So we travel doing the work around the world now. We have members all over the world getting projects and helping us move forward with correcting a lot of our ecological issues that we have. My company is Southwoods Ecosystems, Ecological Design. Sylvia also has her own company. We're all individual ecological designers. Natural Capital is the organization that manages our plant database. We have 4,000 plants, ecologically functional plants in our database that we use in our work, and we're always adding plants to that. And the Society for Ecological Restoration is in here because I'm on and off again member of the organization, but they have principles and they have resources that are top-notch in helping us decide and measure restoration, what the measurable outcomes are, and the practices that we need to put together. So I'm just going to go through some of our process and talk about what we do as an organization and how we work with the different issues such as you've been asking us about also. And if there is a question, please don't hesitate to interrupt me anytime if something needs to be clarified or explained.
If possible, could you make full screen, please?
Let's see. Yeah, it's real hard to understand the microphone if somebody's talking to us. So anyway, so this is just an example of how we work. We start with aerial pictures, GIS information, everything we can find for climate, soils, botany, vegetation, geology, and then we graphically represent the functional spaces and the different plant communities on our maps. And that is where we actually start. So what you see here basically is the beginning of a project. This is for a botanical preserve in Graston, Minnesota, of a basically untouched area of farmland that they wanted to do food production in harvesting in woodlands. And so this is kind of the style that we work, what we're known for, but of course along with this is a lot of supportive documentation. One of the things I also want to start with is the fact that we work with nature and we use nature's functions and systems to help us solve our problems and help us basically help nature get back started in its repair. So a lot of the things we do are not direct but indirect. If we have a problem with insects, we find the predators, we find the vectors, we create the habitat, things like that. So a lot of times when we're dealing with issues and helping with our clients, we're not just going in with sprays, concrete, whatever that might be. We're building an ecological solution that usually is building something else that supports the solution that we're putting together for whatever the need might be in that area. So we're always looking for the relationships in a landscape to help us move forward. Also, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the issues with the source and the sink, which is what I'm seeing working in Molokai. This week, we actually broke ground on a project that we've been planning for about 4 years with large water collection, diversion, swales to help with their flooding. And that's over on Amola. And working quite well in the production of the swales and getting our solutions on the ground for what we basically call proof of concept. So on that we are basically trying out a number of different solutions.
Yeah, I don't have the slideshow though.
Okay. Are we okay? Is there a problem?
The thing is, I don't have the slideshow. I thought you had the slides. You can share screen.
Well, what is it? What's that mean?
That's the slides.
For the presenter, I apologize for having a little technical difficulty on our end, trying to maximize the screen so the audience can see a little bit better.
Why is there on the screen there? That's an old.
And the volume.
So we're having technical, the screen sharing has been paused, it says to me.
Maybe start at the start.
Let's try this again.
There we go. Okay, done.
There we go. How's that?
Much better, thank you.
Interesting. Let me see. It's nice that we can kind of see the screen so you can tell what you're looking at too. Should I continue?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry. I need a waving of arms or a thumbs up or something. I'm not quite sure. Go ahead. Okay. All right. So we want to talk a little bit about the source and the sink, and these are a lot of what we work with, our principles and actions and things like that of how things work. So the source of the water is basically the sky. That the water is coming from. Other times it's creek beds, streams, things like that. And then the sink is where that water is going. And generally the sink is where it disappears. And it's gone, just like a house. So what happens with our hydrological cycle of water in our landscape is many times it gets disrupted. And as you can imagine, originally there was a forest in Maui, and that forest developed over millions of years, and the watershed was created through that, and then the forest actually many times made its own water. But as the forest is taken away, the ability of the land to hold the water diminishes, especially with compaction and things like that. So there's some important things to know, is that one of the issues that I see here also is not the flooding, and is so much the fact that the water isn't infiltrating anymore. And it needs to be held as high as possible in the landscape, as long as possible, to get it in the ground. Because the water that's these years raining is our drinking water 10 years from now. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the rainforest primarily went into the ground when there were trees here. And now we have to do something else to keep the water on the land and give it time to infiltrate. And if we slow the water down and we allow the water to settle, and the detritus and the silt and such to settle in ponds, we're basically helping the water infiltrate and rejuvenate and restore our water table and also the aquifer. So higher elevations of water force the water to run off. The lower elevations are eroded by destabilized stream beds from this force. So the problem is elevation and gravity in this situation. If we had a way to slow the water down with plants, and trees, and shrubs, and all those kinds of things where it's densely forested, it's not an issue. Where now it's kind of grassy plains and cattle fields and things like that, that's our problem. So flooding is basically an inability to manage the runoff, and mud floods are the failure to manage the land itself, and that's coming from development. Now, one of the important things I want to mention here too is the fact that this is not a new thing, and it's recurring all over the world. So the water table pushes the salt water out under the ground. That's how we have fresh water under the island, and we can pump it out in our wells. Because otherwise, salt water from the ocean would just push underneath the ground here. But because it rains, and it has rained pretty much forever, the water infiltrates and pushes the salt water out. And then we also have underwater springs in the coral. We have springs on the shoreline because that is the energy of the water pushing the salt in the ocean back. If that doesn't happen because the wells are being pumped too much, and too much fresh water is being pumped from the wells, we're creating a negative, you might say, pressure in that way, and we're actually letting the ocean come under the ground and contaminate our drinking water. This is happening in Ibiza, island near Spain. They have to now truck in all their drinking water in this rather fancy resort island. In the city of Beirut, they actually have salt water in their public plumbing because it's gotten so bad. Martha's Vineyard, where I was last summer, is the same thing. The private houses, the private wells, are now finding more and more salt in their water because they're pumping the water out too fast. Now, that wouldn't be such a problem if we had infiltration. And one of the reasons we don't is because of hardscapes, roads, culverts, pipes, all those things that want to remove the water from the landscape rather than store the water in the landscape. So we're very efficient most of the time in getting rid of the water, but actually that water is highly important to us in the future in keeping. So working with permaculture and green solutions actually solves both problems. We store the water high on the hillside where it can infiltrate. That water is stored in the ground. It comes out in springs. It helps the ocean, and it also restores the water table for wells and for other purposes that we have with that. So what we like to do is buffer the extremes, but also stay within the carrying capacity of the land that we're on. And those, again, things that we do. We're buffering the extremes of weather. 95% of the time, systems we put in can manage all the water. We can hold most of it, and it infiltrates. The other times when we have these huge rains like a couple weeks ago, then we have to have ways of having the water move off the landscape, but we don't want the landscape to go with it. We want the landscape to stay where it is, and that's part of the problem. I'm sure even a few weeks ago, I was in town at the time with Sylvia. We were driving through that. And you can imagine if that flood was just water, it wouldn't have been half as bad, right? If the water had been clean, it would have been less than just because of the volume and the viscosity that changes with having all the mud and silt in there. But if that was just clean water for the most part coming down, it wouldn't have been that much of an issue, and it would have basically gone into the ocean without too many problems. So I'm just talking a little bit about how we see the solutions and good reasons for doing it. Here we go. Working with different countries and different areas, I just wanted to show you a little bit of the different ways we do this, how we handle water, water conservation, watershed management, and we try to infiltrate as much water as possible with basins, with check dams, with diversions, swales, anything we can to hold the water on the landscape, and that includes plants, trees, vetiver especially, lots of grasses, slow the water down and get it in the ground. We also spread the water as much as possible to thin it out across the land, the thinner the water, the less energy it has, and the less it will erode. So we want to spread the water across because it tends to collect, of course, in the ravines and in the valleys. We can also divert the water out of the stream beds. We're doing a lot of that in Molokai, where we're actually diverting the water with check dams, the water out of the stream bed into basins that are on leveler grounds, so it can sit there and infiltrate in the ground and basically hydrate the entire area. And so in this process of diversions, we also create sediment ponds, retention ponds, and that's where the water goes in the ground, but we're also catching sediment that might be in the water from above, if there is any kind of erosion. And then the last thing we try to do is capture a lot of that water for our human use. So a lot of the water coming down can be used for irrigation, many different things, and the cleaner we can get it, of course, it actually at times can also be used as potable water, depending upon the spring where it might be. But the big goal is to have a lot of springs pop up and have clean water coming out of the ground in the long term. Working on our project in Molokai, about in 2018, here, working in Molokai Ranch, this was our system, bottom right, getting in there to help correct a lot of the runoff problems that are over there. The 58,000 acres in Molokai Ranch is just a catastrophe. It's just incredibly eroded many, many feet into the ground, and it also has covered up the reefs over there. But the mapping that you see is how we plan. We do this through GIS, through contours, and we put in check dams and diversions and basins in order to move the water out of the stream beds and back onto the land in basins. And then, by the way, these are also planted. So depending upon the landscape and the soil, all of these basins can actually be areas to harvest soil for gardening, or they themselves can be fields that can be used for tree crops and such, things like that. The water that's diverted from the stream bed is actually used to hydrate very dry lands for the rest of the year. And we've had issues, even in Haiti where I've worked, where the rain season will leave. 3 months later, they'll have bumper crops of sweet potatoes because the water was put in the ground, and the plants went and found it. They just ran their roots down to get it. And the available water capacity here in the Hawaiian Islands, in Maui and Molokai is actually quite high. The soil holds water really well, and it has a plasticity, which means it doesn't erode as quickly as a lot of other soils, but it holds a lot of water and holds its shape. And that's what's very lucky for us on the steep hills in Molokai also. And I'm assuming here above town. So this is how we do it. There's an example of a little check dam that slows the water back and gives the water a chance to silt out and clean up. And you can imagine the dozens of these little check dams in the stream is going to add oxygen, it's going to clean the water, and the water's going to come down much slower and for a longer period of time and much easier to handle. Go. This is one of the examples too of using one of our little icons. So these are called bunds. So there are ways to collect water, basically like would be called in situ. So in the fields themselves, when it rains, these little fish scale type patterns are built on the landscape like little basins, and they collect water, and each one of those basins has a tree or two planted in it. And so we have basically a self-irrigating landscape, and these are used a lot in dry lands in India and Africa. But the nice thing is that they collect the water, and then as each of them fill up, they spill down to the next one. And by the time the water gets down to the bottom, most of it is held on the landscape and hydrating the soils, tree crops, shrub crops, whatever it might be in the area. So there's using bunds and things like that is patterning the land. So we can adapt and adjust the ravines of the stream beds to divert and hold water, but we can also pattern the land itself to reduce the amount of runoff in the fields and keep the water in the field. Even though it may have some kind of slope to it, we can create little basins to catch the water so it doesn't move out so quickly. This is the final map that we had for a concept map for Molokai Ranch. Again, using base map work, using GIS and using the topography and the contour lines we look for the sweet spots. Where are the obvious, from a satellite point of view, spaces where we can start to store water? And I mean a lot of water in this case. Large rock dams. And I should say, be specific about that. When I say large, I mean long. I don't mean tall. These dams are usually no more than 5 feet tall and repeating in a stream bed. So they hold a lot of water, but not high pressure and not at high walls, because we do want the water to move along. The next step after something like this is then we height the stream beds and do our specific analysis of what and where the best dams are going to go, the diversions and the basins. So we do our mapping this way, we get our GPSs out, and then we get on the land, and we have what's called the stream bed registry. And we register the latitude and longitude of every spot, every stream bed in itself, and we keep a good record of that so we can measure our outcomes and the benefits of doing the work on the land. So this is a typical map of that kind of work in the start. Now in PA, it's kind of interesting to see some of the maps that I found. These two on the right are from a 2017 watershed report. And in talking to people too, I'm kind of seeing what's going on above town and in that area. And as you already probably know a lot of this, but there are different watersheds above the coastline there, and they're separated out by ridges. And there's a lot of different stream beds, rivers, creeks coming down from them. One of the issues, of course, is that these lines most likely have nothing to do with political boundaries, city lines, anything like that, utility. They're not even considered when property is being divided up or the cities are coming together for incorporation. Although, of course, that was the traditional land management system for villages and families in history for Hawaii. So this is the stream bed or the watershed that we're looking at working with, and you can see the affected area as far as my eyes, the small area that's being inundated by a much larger catchment, which is the watershed above. So everything at the top ends up down at the bottom and going through the town, because that's the bottom of the hill, that way. In the bottom picture though, and this we're getting to kind of the green solutions, the wetlands within town are great for a last-ditch effort, no pun intended, but those wetlands and those catchment areas need to be up on the hill. They need to be much higher in elevation above the town to have really any effect, other than just filling up the silt and being high maintenance to clean out. They are good to have. It's something really good to help catch the water, anything that's in it. But you can imagine the upper landscape and that watershed up there, that's where the work needs to be done. And it doesn't need to be as large, it just needs to be more frequent perhaps, and using the natural systems that are already there to keep the water high on the hill, give it a chance to infiltrate, and give it a chance to clean itself up, in a sense, not take the hill down with it when it moves. One of our goals is to reduce the energy of the water, and to do that, you need to slow it down and spread it out. And if a lot of the energy can go into the ground, that's better than going across the ground and tearing up the soil. I wanted to show you a couple of more examples. I just have one here, and you may know some of these things too, but the green belts at cities, many in the United States, all around the world, cities are deciding that they need to have a green belt or an urban zone of no development. And so in this case, Toronto is famous for basically their 10-mile and wider green belt around the town, which is reserved for farming and forest, and then they can develop after that. Minneapolis has this kind of naturally with the riverbanks, things like that, but a lot of cities around the world now are putting green belts around the city where they're limiting development so they can keep their natural systems and they can keep their farming and everything that's going on around the city instead of it all being paved over and creating more hardscape and more runoff and more problems with water. So that I see as being actually maybe a really great solution. This is a green solution, is to use part of the land that's above the town, bands of it at different levels for different ecological services in order to clean the water, hold the water before it gets to the town. So much of this has to do with the rate that the water is coming down, but also the fact is there's nothing stopping it. from where it goes. And of course, there's a lot of, I'm assuming, city and organizational cooperations that needed something like that. But the water is coming down, and it needs to not come down so fast. And that's kind of how we see it here too. Work up high on the Ka'amola where we're working right now. Our basins, we're trying to get as high on top of the hill as we can to even get started, because that's where the water is starting to hold it there. And if we can do that, the water will infiltrate underground through the geology and come out in springs down below. But the higher we can work, the less problem we have with erosion, because it's the altitude, or excuse me, the elevation is causing that. So this is also some examples of, this is actually key line design and from P.A. Yeoman's book, actually written in 1952, about how to hold water on the land. And these are some of the types of systems that we like to use in connection. So even all these stream beds, all these basins, all of them across the property, or across the landscape, I should say, are connected. They're a web of storage spaces, not just a stream bed and a bunch of dams. The lines actually go across swales, channels, canals, whatever it might be, and moving the water back and forth to areas that are drier, and areas that need it from areas that are being inundated. And especially here, the water doesn't always come down in the same spot. It might be somewhere else, but these are spreader channels to the different basins, so the water actually equals out across the landscape, which gives you a lot more storage as the water spreads out in its use. This is some of the work we're doing in Maui right now, and that's our team on Molokai. We are very specifically using science, and we want to be accurate with the work that we're doing. We take very good measurements, and we stick to our plan. We're designing the swales in Molokai specifically so we can keep track of the water, what's being held, sediment, caught, all those types of things, and setting our own standards for that. We want to build a replicable system to be used all across Molokai, but the other thing I wanted to say that all the systems that we build are site-specific. So what would happen near PA, that's going to be different than anywhere else, because it's different soil, different slope, and everything has to be customized for a certain strategy. Our tactics are what change. We adjust those depending upon the slope and what the needs are in that space. So our goals with this, as you see, is the soil is to stay on the mountain. That's where it needs to stay as much as possible. The water to be cleaned of soil before entry to the stream beds and down to the shoreline. In that sense, also, when it's clean, the water is slow. So those rivers and those streams flow longer after each rain event, and they give the water a longer period of time to infiltrate into the ground. The deer population needs to be managed. I think everybody knows that. That is probably one of the worst problems I see up on the hills. Deer. We sat working on this project in Maui last week, and we watched 130 deer cross the road in front of us in the morning when we were going to our project. And that's just one site. I know there are 200 just on the acreage we're working in Molokai. The deer are a horrible problem, an ecological catastrophe on all the islands as far as I can tell, and causing a great amount of damage. Not seen very easily, but the water that's coming down, the mud that's coming down is from the deer. And basically we have the cattle, there was the pineapple, there was all that agriculture, you might say. The deer now are the biggest problem for the reefs. So this is the competition that's happening in this. I'm absolutely positive. It's the deer, once the deer are fenced out on our project here that we're showing, within 5 years, you're going to see an entirely different ecosystem there, different plants, and the water is going to come down slowly and clean, and it's going to be a cooler place to be just because we're fencing them. Also talking about the aquifer earlier, replenishing that in stores, as springs repaired, very important to us. And then also sustaining the ahupua'a as a stable resource, just like it was back in the day. It needs to be something that is economically viable, ecologically viable, and spiritually viable. There needs to be a reason to take care of these lands, and we're intermixing tree crops and native crops and historical crops all across these lands at the same time that we're restoring the watershed. Everybody has to win. The land has to win, and the people who live on the land need to have an income or at least have sustained foodstuffs coming from the land at the same time, and hopefully something instead of venison, which is actually probably still venison, just we'll manage it hopefully that much better. And then bringing the native forest ecosystem back into restoration. Once we have done our project here in Molokai and we get it stabilized, you can see the soil under our feet there, we'll be back with the seeds and the trees from the mountainsides. And we're going to be transplanting trees, gathering seeds. We have a nursery already down at the fish pond, and we're getting all these things started so we can go back and replant this whole hillside at the same time. So I know that I'm probably running over on time here, so I'll go very quickly, especially with development on the shoreline. A lot of things can happen so that things kind of work in integration into the natural systems there. And a few things I've listed here, reducing the footprint, of course, in the structures themselves and how they're placed on the shoreline, salt marshes, seagrass patches, dunes, all those things help restore the shoreline. Autonomous irrigation systems basically are when it rains, you keep the water and you use that for your irrigation. We don't use drinking water for irrigation. I know in Maui they have separate systems for that, county water for irrigation, those kinds of things, which is great, but we want to use the water that falls on somebody's property for their irrigation, and that in a sense is cisterns, tanks, and things like that. And also using constructing wetlands and basins for the runoff on the property. On-site composting, planting lots of trees, these are also those green things. Composting as either as a community or as individuals is a fantastic way to cycle nutrients back into the ground. It just creates more soil and creates more opportunity to grow plants. The shoreline hardscape setback, I'm not sure what you have here, of course, but making sure that there's 100 feet or more between any kind of compacting action disturbance and the shoreline itself. We want to imitate nature, create gentle slopes, employ soft armoring. There's little pictures here in the bottom, but basically instead of concrete barriers, things like that, or even stone, is create slope, grasses, and vegetation on the shoreline to hold the ground and hold the soil. They're much better at doing that and filtering the water than any kind of hardscape rock or stone that way. We have grass and shrub layers in the yards, of course, and then also, there is no recipe for this. All of our solutions are site-specific in order to get this done. This is a little bit then also of how we work. Just to talk about our process, we like to think we're working with stewards of the community. So we have the larger community on the outside, obviously with public participation, developing the projects and the needs. But we as designers, as an organization, we work with the local experts and the local committees, you might say, to interact with them for understanding what the problems are and what the solutions can be. And we submit our material to a smaller group that then goes through it, sends it back for changes, or moves it on to the community. So we work with fewer voices when we're on site so we can get what the clear answers are, or clear questions are also, of what we need to do. And so this is our process in doing that. Thank you for your time. Still, yeah. A few of the organizations we worked with across the world, been very fortunate to do that. And I have to say too, my fourth trip to Hawaii is just anytime I get called, it's an absolute. Love coming here to work, especially in January and February, of course. It's a great time to be here, and I hope to be back soon. We hope to be back soon. Sylvia's not going anywhere, but I'll be back soon too. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And will you be able to stay on the line for a while and answer questions? Did you disconnect them? Will you be able to stay on the line for a little while and answer questions?
Yes.
Because maybe they can't do that.
Off the beach.
Maybe you could repeat it to us if there's a question. I'm not getting the audio here.
So, can you hear us?
Yeah, it's just really muffled.
Okay. Okay, before we get into a discussion, I'm opening up the public testimony on the topic of watershed management. So, if you have testimony, a limit of 3 minutes, and please approach the standing microphone and state your name and while the topic is given. Thank you.
Yeah. Maybe someone could type it in the chat and you could read it too.
Do you have a testifier? Yes.
I got a question for the
We'll get to that. First we have public testimony, and then we'll get to that.
Aloha, thank you, Rob. Is this on? No. Thank you. Thank you, Rob. I think there's a few people who want to testify. We just weren't clear on the process. I hope everyone enjoyed that presentation. It was great. I agree with what I heard, and it's not the first time I've heard it. I've heard it from the community over and over, and that's one of the reasons that one of my comments was to put a policy to implement the Southwest Maui Watershed Plan. There were permaculturists on that Watershed Advisory Committee and Steering Committee, and they have many of the same ideas that you heard about. Basically, slow the water, settle the sediment, and store the water in the aquifer. That would also benefit our wetlands. If there was more, it would help restore that hydrology. So definitely in support of those kinds of ideas. And my other comment on the watershed plan was that we should have a policy to have a watershed advisory committee from this community to be part of guiding those kind of efforts. Another comment that I made is that I think we need to protect all the gulches with buffers. Those gulches may appear to be short and not connected, but they are connected underground, and the hydrology is important. When we build too close to those waterways as natural infrastructures, we put people and buildings in harm's way. So we need to, even if it looks to you like a small gulch or an insignificant gulch, it's probably not. And we can't know everything, but we do know that when you make the water go faster and you let it build up more head, that it's more energy, it's more dangerous. And that's what some of the kinds of development that have been done here do. When you cover over a stream, when you bury a stream, when you try to put it through a narrow culvert, you create these problematic conditions. So that's my comments. Thank you very much.
Any clarifying questions for the testifier? Daniel?
Hi, Daniel.
Hello, Robin. Thank you for being here. I wanted to get a definition from you for your comment, natural infrastructure. How do you define natural infrastructure?
It's the natural systems that we have. Right now, we have a natural drainage infrastructure. It's been somewhat harmed or degraded by development, but we do have that natural infrastructure. And it's also the idea when you say natural infrastructure or nature-based solutions of working with nature instead of against nature. Working with the energy of nature and with what we already have. The other thing about natural infrastructure is it's more resilient. When you have a gulch and you have a buffer, you have a floodplain. When you build there, you have no floodplain and you're trying to channel that water through an artificial infrastructure, a man-made. So the natural is what we already have and what we can restore. And even when we have to build something, if we mimic that natural system, it's going to be more resilient and safer and better for the environment and better for our economy and the safety of human beings.
Thank you, Robin.
Other clarifying questions, Cody?
Hello, Robin. So these committees that you're talking about, would they be willing to work alongside Native Hawaiian organizations as well?
Yes, I think Native Hawaiians should be represented on the committees. Not to mention Native Hawaiian philosophy on how these systems work, you know.
Any further clarifying questions for Testifier Robin? Daniel?
Sorry, Robin, I should have asked this when I asked my first question, but in your suggested revisions on the one of the actions, implement the Maui Meadows subdivision drainage master plan utilizing natural infrastructure and nature-based systems to the fullest extent possible. How do you see that happening in Maui Meadows?
Well, I was thinking more about above Maui Meadows because a lot of the people who live in Maui Meadows perceive that there have been changes in how the water is flowing due to the changes above them with grading and other things. I think Maui Meadows is a great example also of why we need buffers around that natural infrastructure. Those gulches in Maui Meadows could convey the water efficiently, but I personally have seen when the water was restricted by a small culvert under a road that the water jumped over the road and there was a house down gradient and it hit the roof. It was a cottage, hit the roof of that cottage, and it was flooding everywhere, but that water actually jumped onto the roof of that cottage, which was built just a couple of feet from the gulch. And it is dangerous, and we shouldn't be building that close to natural or man-made waterways.
Great answer. Thanks for clarifying that for me.
Any further clarifying questions? Thank you. And next testifier.
Hello, my name is David Dawn. I'm with the South Maui Save the Wetlands Hui. I've been living in this area for 20 years and I've experienced many floods firsthand. I'm here today because flooding is getting worse year by year. If you remember, January 27th, we had severe flooding in South Maui that cost the life of a Maui firefighter who was swept into a stormwater drain by uncontrolled floodwaters. This could have been any one of us, and the risk is real every time it rains. The South Maui drainage plan and the drainage infrastructure relies heavily on natural features like gulches, streams, and wetlands, so they must be protected. I support the testimony of Maui Tomorrow and their recommended and amended rules regarding the 100-foot setbacks for riparian stream banks. But this rule must be applied Mauka to Makai to allow streams to flow and to give the water somewhere to go. I'm concerned with your gulch maps on your website from your previous meetings. The gulch map diagrams appear to be derived from the ArcGIS layer Gulches 2023, which only depicts gulches of an arbitrary depth of approximately 6 feet. Your gulch map appears very fragmented because of this. The many gulches in South Maui average only 3 to 6 feet deep. The CPAC gulch diagrams also do not show the Keokea Gulch outlet at the Laie wetland, aka Keokea estuary, which is Central Kihei's main drainage way. So we need better maps, guys. The reason for protecting gulches is to ensure continuous, uninterrupted Mauka to Makai stream flow so that they can conduct stormwater past our neighbourhoods and not into them. All South Maui gulches are drainage ways. And in addition, the gulch maps, you need to look at the streams DAR aquatic resource layer and the FEMA firm layers that show the flood zones emanating from these streams and where they all join together on the floodplain. We need to create a more complete watershed map showing gulches, streams, wetlands, and flood zones. We need to bring together all of the local knowledge, past and present, to create a comprehensive inventory of watershed features and create maps that show the path of the water down the gulches and streams and where they intersect with the urban stormwater systems as well. In any discussion with the watershed, we must include input from historians and cultural practitioners who have the vast knowledge of the kahawai, streams that have existed long existed in South Maui. Thank you.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions for the testifier? Daniel?
Hello, dear. Thank you for being here. Thanks for all you do in South Maui. Have you looked at the maps in the Kihei Drainage Master Plan? Have you seen those maps? And
Yes.
do you think those maps need to be improved?
All the maps are very fragmented and they all deal with separate issues. They don't all come together in one overarching database of all of the resources. So you have some that maybe in the Kihei Drainage Master Plan 2016, they had the drainage maps which show the streams and stormwater alternating between culverts across private lands into many areas labelled as wetlands, and back into other areas that are receiving basins for all the stormwater. And these are on private lands, and all of the Kihei floodplain at one time was a receiving area for all of the streams that came down the mountain. And this isn't clearly shown on maps. You usually just see the stream ending before it hits the coastline. And what it doesn't show you, and there's been studies on the other islands that show this, is that in bygone days, the whole area was a wetland and a marshy area that received the stormwater. And it's doing it today, it's just not given enough area to soak in. We've hardscaped all the surfaces and we get all these floodwater problems. So yes, we need to update the maps. I've seen all the studies and reference the South Maui watershed plan that really needs to be implemented. The Kihei Drainage Master Plan was, long since defunct, and we really need a new update for all the maps and take a serious look at the natural infrastructure that we heavily rely on so we don't accidentally build over it.
You talk about the Maui Tomorrow recommended language. I think it had to do with setbacks.
Yes.
Do you like that language? Because I read your written testimony about setbacks, and you weren't happy what the CPAC did.
My initial testimony sent a few days ago was before I had an opportunity to review the Maui Tomorrow updates, and actually was able to give some input on those. So what Maui Tomorrow has given most recently in their testimony is the updated one that I do approve of. It does incorporate, the ideas and the necessary setbacks that are needed. I just wanted to emphasize that, yes, we need the setbacks from the gulches, but they need to be Malcolm and Mackay. It's no good if they're just segmented little, sections of gulch. It has to be the stream as it flows.
Any further questions? Wade?
Is the Piilani Highway the main problem of flooding?
The Piilani Highway is interesting because it's basically a dam wall with only a limited, finite number of passages for the whole watershed to find its way through. So what the Piilani Highway does is it focuses wider areas of watershed down into very narrow constrictions. So we have the three main gulches in the North Kihei. Waikoa Gulch goes to about a 100-foot bridge. Kalanahakoi goes to another 100-foot bridge. And Waikuilani goes to another 100-foot bridge. It seems like a lot. But above that, you have, above those three, you have about a 50 square mile catchment area catching rain. And the entire South Maui catchment area receives about 1.4 billion gallons of water every inch of rain. So all this water is coming down. So what Piilani Highway does, it's obviously a necessary evil, but it does tend to constrict all these gulches down. But what we can do is if we do some gulch setbacks and maintenance upstream, a lot less water is going to be focusing down through those choke points. And those choke points get siltified up to the point where they hit the road deck, and we get 12 foot of mud left behind in those gulches. So if we can stop that water coming down, like the gentleman presenter said, by creating kind of green infrastructure, if we have the proper gulch setbacks with vegetated setback areas, we can prevent a lot of that problem at the choke points. And then we also have an opportunity to deal with the lower watershed, the lower watershed areas where a lot of the flooding occurs by not building any more houses in the major flood zones, and the gold setbacks will also help to address that as well.
Thank you.
Are there questions? Thank you. And next testifier.
Good evening. My name is Mike Ellerdy. I'm a property owner at 36 South Kihei Road, and I'm here tonight to speak about the Waiakoa Gulch drainage culvert. And I'd like to thank you for the opportunity you gave me to speak the last time I was here, and this time I did do a little more research. I got the agenda, and I've been trying to educate myself, and appreciate the help we got from Bill Snipes at the planning, or with the Maui Representative Office. And I also, having served on boards like this, I appreciate your time and your effort you're putting into long-range planning. I think it's a prudent and wise thing to do, but I also feel that there's a more immediate need that needs to be addressed quickly. And I think that the death of Trey Evans Dumoran was a tragedy that didn't need to happen. And I think a real contributing factor to his death was the lack of maintenance and drainage of the drainage culverts. And I think it's fair to say that the lack of drainage of the maintenance culverts manifests itself in 4 different ways. The first way is it puts our first providers, the Maui County first providers, at risk. Every time there's a flood, these guys have to come out and put their lives at risk for something that should have been addressed by proper maintenance of the culverts. Second way, we've got a public safety nightmare here. I mean, thank goodness there haven't been any other residents or visitors that had been damaged or gotten injured as a result of it. I think there's a clear and present danger to the public safety because of the lack of maintenance on these culverts. Third, we've got environmental catastrophe right around the corner to our reefs and to our shoreline. I can tell you that after the last flood, we couldn't go out in the water for 2 weeks. I mean, it's been 2 weeks and it's still churning up things, and that pollution is out there that's causing damage to our shoreline. And fourth, and last but not least, it's damage to property damage. Business owners have inventory lost. I mean, ABC store, the Maui market, there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars being lost there. And I can tell you, as a property owner here at Kihei Beach, we have, every time there's an event, a flood event like this, it's $1 million. We've got to replace all the lower units, flooring, and all the mitigation that goes on. It's $1 million per pop every time there's a flood. And this is all resulting in the lack of maintenance to those culverts. It's my understanding that Hawaii Revised Statutes, HRS 46115, requires that the county take responsibility for maintenance of the drainage ways and remove debris and sources of blockage. That's not happening. Although I will say that just today, we did have Maui County Department of Public Works people out in the Waiakoa Gulch digging for about an hour. And I have a picture of what the results were. I mean, prior to them coming out there, the water was right up to the lip of that Waiakoa Gulch bridge. After they've been out there for an hour removing muck and debris, it dropped down. It's still 10 inches. I've read some of the reports that say that the water coming down these gulches is running at the speed of the Colorado River. I can tell you, the Colorado River is going to... Pardon?
Excuse me, your 3 minutes.
Oh, my 3 minutes? Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much. I just want to say thanks for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for, listening to us. Thank you.
Thank you. You can hang on for just a second in case anyone has any questions for you. Clarifying question. I think it was Vernon first and then Cody.
Question? No?
So just wanted to comment on so when rain tomorrow, the weekend, everybody clean up now. They're going to have to deal with what's coming around the corner. So
the next 100-year flood event is coming tomorrow.
Yeah. So I'm into the 5-year flood. We're not waiting for the 100 because it's just happening and occurring. So the comment I have is, here we are trying to mitigate or trying to figure out, for property loss. human safety. It's kind of like being our lifestyle, living in South Maui, because there's not too much we can do, Pilani Highway. So we gotta figure out Mauka there. So, and I know exactly where you're talking about, the Waikoa outlet. And I know Public Works gotta go figure that out, because they should not have put that concrete railing up, because I documented that whole project from day one to it ending. And I did not want that barrier up, because the result is the water not going straight to the ocean.
Right.
It's going north and south to those areas that are being impacted.
I agree with everything except that there is something that can be done, and that is to maintain that culvert or the gulch. And after each flood event, it plugs up with debris and mud and sticks, and then it sits there until the Department of Public Works has an opportunity to get around to it. And I don't know that it's become a priority as much as what I feel it should be.
And also I hear like they always they shorthanded. So
appreciate that.
Yeah,
I do appreciate
they
that.
shorthanded, and then who's in charge of the gulch? Who will clean that up?
Well, according to Maui statutes, it sounds like it's the Maui County Department of Public Works that's responsible for maintaining them.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
And then Cody.
Aloha.
Aloha.
How long have you been a property owner down there by Waikoa?
7 years.
7 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chair, clarifying question. We had one from Kyoto. Right here, one more.
Thank you. Aloha, Mike. Thank you for coming and testifying. Just a couple of comments, and then so it's good that you followed along with the website. I encourage everybody to do that. If you haven't already, in our actions for this section, there is an action specifically about maintenance, 4.04 to be exact. I don't know when we're going to get to it, but come back and testify, please. Yeah, because
during this meeting?
I'm not sure if we're going to get to action when we review policies, but keep up with the. Because in these graphs we have priorities that are like ongoing, medium, high.
Right.
So if you feel strongly that it should be a high priority when it's designated medium, please
I
go for everyone else too.
I'm trying to follow along as best
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can. Yeah. Thank you. I will come back. Thank you.
And Daniel.
Hi, Mike. Nice to see you back.
Thank you for having me back.
I just wanted to ask you, when you saw the gulch needed some cleaning, did you put in a request for service? Did you do that?
Bill, I've just learned of that. Bill gave me an education on how to do that, and so that's our next step. But absolutely, thank you. Thanks for reminding me. Yes, thank you.
Further clarifying questions to the testifier? Yeah. Thank you. And next testifier.
Aloha. Aloha, Wayne. My name is Joelle Lemaire. I've been a long-distance swimmer all my life. I swim here probably every day for about 12% of my time. That's 2 hours. I have not only swam all over different places, but all over on Maui. There are places that I do not swim anymore. Now, we're going back 30 years, so it has changed. I have a great concern over all the development that goes on before we do any kind of control over where the water will go. And, water is vai. Vai is wealth. This is our sustenance of Maui. This is how we live. There are places that are still, I will not go in the water there. There is so much debris. The water actually smells and tastes differently. If you are in the water every day and you swim the same kind of trek almost every day, you see the changes. You see the changes on the reef. You see the fish population different. And this is all this mud, bacteria, enterococci, and Escherichia coli. I have gotten H. pylori twice in the last 5 years. And I know it's got to be from going in the ocean. Of course, I'm always careful. I wait, and I've been waiting a lot longer the last few years to get back into the water after we have a heavy-duty rain. And we're going to have more of them because we have global warming. We have climate change. So how are all of these things going to be mitigated to protect our ocean, our thriving reefs, which we all know gives us that oxygen, that beauty? And if you want to come from a simple economic standpoint, if word gets out on the internet that the water is all yucky in Maui, they ain't gonna come and spend $1,000 a night. Simple as that. So what I want to know is, how are these things going to be implemented? It seems like there's an awful lot of construction which just goes on, you know, laissez-faire. And then all of a sudden, here's buildings, but now there is all this mud and deer poop sluicing down into our beautiful ocean. Thank you for your time. I hope something is done about this. And I want to be a part of it. Thank you so much. Mahalo.
Thank you. I have a question from Kyoki.
Well, thank you for coming and testifying. Where are these areas that you don't swim anymore, if I might ask?
I don't got a haycraft. There's some places down at Ke'awakapu which have gotten kind of poo-poo. And as far as the other side, you know, I used to go out past Nahiko and all of that.
Yeah.
No.
Do you normally swim closer to shore or further out? Or what kind of changes are you seeing out there? Just turbidity and sediment?
Turbidity, the scent, the taste, and I'm not talking about salinity. I'm talking about some days I go out there and it smells like chemicals, like plastic. Other days it smells like bacteria, you know, like garbage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that, so this is just a comment, that after these rains that are going to happen, after any of the rains that make these riverways pour out, everybody go down and look at what's on the beach inside that sediment. Majority of that is deer poop.
Deer poop, trees, branches, garbage, because unfortunately we have houseless living in our gulches, and you know, my heart just goes out to them. It's a terrible situation. So we do need more housing, and I know that is under a lot of scrutiny right now. But we need housing that, you know, we as Maui residents can afford to live in. About 20-something years ago, I was doing tours on the island, and very often we would take the folks from the Grand Wailea or the Fairmont Kealani and hike them out. At that time, we could still do swinging bridges. We would go and lunch them out at the Waiaku, at the dunes. And there were a lot of homeless. And they would ask me, what's going on here? Okay, we have some extra food left over. I see Kiki playing. I go, you got a parent around here? So, oh yeah, Kiki here. We'd go and say, would you like, we have a lot of sandwiches and drinks left over. Thank you so much. You got Tutu babysitting the kids while mom or pop or both are at work, but they don't make enough money to have an apartment or a home. Very sad.
Cody?
Aloha.
Aloha.
I was wondering, have you noticed difference in springs? And a lot of time when you go in the water, there's springs in certain areas.
It's cold. All of a sudden this cold comes up, and you know that that's a spring. And also, because I'm so attuned to water, I mean, I draw differently when I'm in that. You can tell if you're going to be in salt water, you're going to float more, and you get into fresher water, brackish water, you're going to slightly sink, and I'm very sensitive to that. Yes, there are springs that come up. There's one right at the end by the Monokai. I feel that every day.
And have you noticed, like, with a lot of these changes, have you noticed any difference in the springs? Like, maybe are you not noticing it as much, or it's still the same?
I still notice them. I've also noticed those odors. And that really stresses me out because then I'm trying to swim with my face out of the water. So, yeah.
Further questions to the testifier? Thank you.
Thank you. Mahalo.
And next testifier.
Aloha, my name is Joy Nelson. I'm a member of the Kihei Canoe Club and a resident of North Kihei. My comments align more with the last two speakers, but more specifically to the Canoe Club. As we all know,
Could you get a
about
little
3
closer
weeks
to the
ago,
microphone, please?
I'm sorry?
Could you get a little closer to the microphone?
Talking to it.
Okay. As we all know, about 3 weeks ago, a storm brought high surf, wind, rain, and it devastated the club, the beach area. Maui County closed the beach down completely and called it a disaster area. In addition to the damage caused by the high surf, dirty brown water, mud, and debris from upcountry flowed down over South Kihei Road and into the canoe site, causing serious damage. A few years ago, the club had the foresight to lease a small area of conservation between the Maui Canoe Club and the Hawaiian Voyaging Society. At present, all of our canoes are located on this land, and the club is allowing some paddling for the site for experienced paddlers, but not for visitors. Access to the ocean is difficult, and canoes have to be carried into the water. The club plans to continue clearing and using this site under the conservation land guidelines for the future. However, now many of our programs, particularly those for young children, teens, and visitors, are suffering. We spoke to a woman this morning that is a visitor, and she was so excited about being able to paddle, but she can't because there's no place to go at the regular canoe club. The Kihei Canoe Club members are asking the county to restore the beach sand now and look into ways that can mitigate the damages of future storms. This problem has happened before and is likely to happen again due to climate change and design problems. Each time it seems to get worse. All the gulches need major remediation. Please stop the Mauka mud and debris runoff into the ocean. The so-called bridge near the ABC store should be made into a real bridge. Please restore the beach so the club can continue to provide the cultural and recreational opportunities for now and the future. It is of huge cultural importance. And she was talking about the debris. From my house, I saw a sofa floating past in the ocean and a filing cabinet. I'm not sure if that came from the erosion from some of the condos near us, or if that actually came through the gulch. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a question for you had a question, Vernon?
Comment? So, the Kihei Canoe Club. So they lost that shoreline in front of the ABC store.
Yeah,
And so with the other canoe clubs and other water apparatus that sit on the shoreline, you know, even at that they have to figure out a management issue eventually. Kihei Canoe Club losing all that sand has nothing to do with
climate change. It was human traffic. That every day they go out, the sand always get pushed back. Yeah, so it was a human erosion. Now they stay down by Sugar Beach. Yeah, the pink canoe guys. Now they're not supposed to have the canoes on the sand dune, but I see they get 2 canoes on that sand dune. So it's gonna happen again. We're gonna lose that sand dune as we have lost that by the pier, by the old Key Canoe Club site. Yeah, the water comes from Mauka. We're gonna do the best we can, but nature is payback time, kind of, because 50, 60 years ago, this is not supposed to happen. South Maui, the ranch. Maybe bad plan to have the ranchers up Mauka, but the nature is nature's turn, and we don't like what's happening, but nature is going to do what it has to do. But we're going to try the best we can. For the old Key Canoe Club site, they got to relocate. They have to find another place because the canoe's not going to be there right now.
It's not very hopeful. I understand there used to be 200 acres of wetlands around here, and now it's down to 20. I don't know if that's accurate, but I heard that.
Around 22% left for the wetlands or something.
Any further questions for the clarifying questions? Cody?
Could I say something?
No, you have to wait until it's your turn.
Oh, I was going to ask you.
Hello. So this past Friday we had some members of the Key Canoe Club come down to our exploration area, and they helped us. Basically they came down to just kind of learn from us and see what kind of issues we could help with. Because of everything that you guys are dealing with down there. And while we're doing that, they're helping us. We did a site walk with them and basically gave them our ideas of restoration and coming from a very cultural point of view. And one of the things I was telling them was that because of all these impacts that have been happening over the years, we're kind of reaching this culmination where everything is kind of really being impacted, right? And at this point, the only thing we can really do is move with the Aina. Yeah, I understand that Hoiva or canoe paddling is a very important tradition in Hawaiian culture, but it was also an extreme balance. They understood what was happening in the ocean, what was happening on the land, right? And they understood how to move with those things. I think the things that we've been lacking recently is understanding what's been happening in the ocean, what's been happening on Mauka, and now how everything is being impacted, right? One of the things I was letting them know was that our seed banks are really, really important. When it came down to the site, to your guys' site, I saw very, very little remnants of those seed banks, which meant that there was a lot of traffic that was disturbing those seed banks. And those seed banks are really, really important because they help with the resiliency of those areas, much more so than any plants that we try to plant in, because they've been there for so long, right? And so I know it's hard to hear. It's very hard to hear, but kind of what Brennan was saying is true. Like we're at this point now where we really need to just step back and try to understand what the Aina is trying to do to correct itself and move with the Aina. I told them the best things they can do is basically to help to restore their seed banks as much as possible and to really mitigate the traffic. And that's the hardest part, when you get all these people in one place, moving around, moving the canoes, and everybody's moving this way and that way. Because I remember that area years and years ago, and there was a lot of native plants that were in that area. And sadly, when I went back to look at it, they were all gone. So I can tell that there's been a lot of traffic, and yeah, I mean, that's basically what I wanted to say. But you talk to some of your leaders in your group, they'll let you know about the trip they made down to our place.
Any further clarifying questions to the testifiers? Thank you. Next testifier.
Aloha, Kelly King. I'm testifying for myself, and also on behalf of this group from Maui Tomorrow that's been looking at the, in lieu of having a lot of people involved because we can't get people into this meeting virtually, we've created a working group that's looking at some of the policies. So I just wanted to reiterate some of the things that you've already gotten in the last day or two in paper. And by the way, just speaking, I'm glad that Hioki, you clarified that we're on policy issues, because a lot of what you're hearing has to do with implementation and enforcement, and that's the administration's job. So I think you can get through this a lot faster if you kind of separate out, like, when you get to the action items, if people can come ready to comment on what action items are in the plan and what they would like to see differently. I think we'll get through to some solutions faster. But basically, we looked at the amendments that were made at the last meeting, and there's some concerns that some of those may result in worse flooding than we've already been experiencing. And so we kind of went over some of the changes that were made and made some recommendations. I want to speak to the first couple of them because the first one is on 2.4.1, which speaks about wetlands and the definition of wetlands. And it goes back, and this is to me going backwards. If you go back to Section 404 of the Clean Water Act, we're going to be going backwards in time. The reason why the council in the last year passed the Wetland Restoration and Preservation Law is because that definition was too narrowing. And we're seeing a lot of the lands that we know in South Maui should be and could be wetlands. They're dried up, or they're not wet some of the time, being developed because they're no longer considered wetlands. And so we wanted to make that, rather than using all three of those conditions, and if you want specifics on that, you can ask Rob, because she's the expert on the Army Corps of Engineer water conditions that require to have to call something a wetland. And so we changed it to 2 out of those 3 conditions being met would cause an area to be able to be restored back to the wetland preservation programs that that we're starting to implement to get them back. If you, any of you you all live in Kihei, you all saw the big storm flooding. I went to the kilo that we did in the Laie wetlands about a week and a half ago, and we couldn't go into the wetlands because they're all wet, they're flooded. All that water that would have been down in the ocean with more debris and more dirt was being held in that wetland area, and it was doing its job. And Joy is right that we've gone from over 200 acres of wetlands to less than 25. So that's why we have all this muddy water and this flooding. And so the importance of it, I wanted to mention it last week, but I didn't have time, but I wanted to mention wetlands also in the vein of being important as cultural sites. They should be considered cultural sites. There's a lot of cultural activity that goes on. And hopefully one of these days you all will be able to make it to one of the kilos. It's a very spiritual and cultural discussion that happens. On the second one, just real quickly, that more specific policies are needed to ensure that development and redevelopment addresses all of the drainage issues, not the issues that are most economically or aesthetically viable. And so when we talk about nature-based solutions, and everyone's been talking about how the natural ways the water goes, it's not natural anymore because we've done so much development in Kihei. So the water is going in and around developments and through developments, and we've obstructed nature. So, if we're going to get back to that.
3 minutes.
Okay.
Can you wrap up?
Thank you. If we're going to get back to that, then we really have to focus on the biological, ecological drainage that, people like Amanda Porty are working on the presenter today. So I'll stop there.
Any clarifying questions? Is this the mayor? Daniel?
Aloha, Kelly.
Aloha.
So on 2.4.1, it's when we discussed this, and I'll answer the question shortly. It seemed that we came to the conclusion that the intent of the policy was to ensure there are adequate buffers, rather than defining what a wetland is. And so, given that is why we did what we did, do you think we just need a policy that defines what a wetland is?
Well, I don't think you need a policy because it's defined in the legislation that we passed last year, the council passed last year. There will be an overlay, so there'll be specific, hopefully in less than a year, there'll be a specific map we can look at that shows us where the wetlands are. And that may be shifting too. There may be other areas opening up that will be considered wetlands. But referring to the county ordinance that was passed, the definition of the county ordinance, which is our definition, which goes beyond and looks at other areas beyond what the Army Corps of Engineers considers a wetland. You know, we've had some areas where we've had huge arguments with that definition, specifically on that property that was proposed for a medical center a few years ago. And the definition that the county has come up with in our ordinance is, it looks at areas that, like that area, that Dr. Botch's property, that used to be a wetland, used to be a recognizable wetland. So you don't have to necessarily define it, but I think you need to refer to the county ordinance versus the Clean Water Act if you're going to talk about wetlands and what wetlands are.
Okay, so just to be clear, what the intent of the policy that the CPAC adopted so far is that where there are wetlands, saying where there are wetlands, however wetlands are defined, there should be a buffer that serves all the purposes that is found within the policy. So that was the intent of that policy.
Of that policy, right. But you have to know what is considered a wetland in order to know where those buffers are going. And the other thing that the group, our group talked about was that 100 feet is very, very much below the levels that are used elsewhere in the world and in other jurisdictions. So it felt like too small of a buffer maybe. Maybe it should be 200 feet. So that was another thing that we discussed, that giving that buffer for the wetlands to overflow, for the wetlands to meander, maybe even expand, knowing that that's going to happen more and more as we get more of these storms. Thank you.
Question from Kyoki.
Aloha, Kelly. Thank you again for coming. This legislation, did it include the redirecting of streams that were diverted in the past? Because I understand that the frustration, what is a wetland? I mean, it cannot be wet if streams that used to feed it don't.
Well, the philosophy behind the policy we were developing with the planning department support is that an area doesn't necessarily have to be wet to be a wetland. I mean, we've gone years of Kalia Pond being dry, for some of you have lived here a long time, and we never stopped considering it a wetland. So wetlands are going to be wet sometimes, and sometimes they're not. But the two of the three conditions had to do with the vegetative state in those areas, and so certain vegetation is found. And it doesn't have to necessarily be in abundance, because if there's no water, it's hard to find any vegetation in abundance. But that was one of the conditions. So we weren't necessarily saying what type of water, because we were saying what type of conditions have to be in certain areas in order to be considered a wetland.
Thank you.
Any further clarifying questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
And next testifier.
Hi, Doug Ballard, Kihei resident, but I'm also here to comment not just as a resident, but also on Maui Tomorrow review and comments. On section 2.4.5, it lists certain named gulches. And we support Lucienne Dene's comments that she submitted, I think, to you in writing. They added 7 more named gulches that should really be looked at. And we also support David Dorn's comments about really the need to develop perhaps a better map database of these particular gulches. Also in 2.4.5, it almost seems like there are 2 different things perhaps that are being discussed. One is gulches and the need to protect gulches, and the other is flood inundation areas and the need to protect flood inundation areas, and they're not necessarily the same thing. So we think it might be good to separate flood inundation area protections into a new policy statement, and that's shown in our in the recommended language that we submitted. Also, this topic in particular is a really challenging topic, because a lot of the impacts that we get here in South Maui are coming from outside our planning area. And so one of your policies, I think it was the last one, talks about the need or the support of coordinating with upcountry groups. We think that should be an action item where that can actually go forward and be implemented, because I think that's crucial, and we think that's crucial to managing this extremely important issue. Also, recommending the use of 100-year 24-hour storm engineering standards instead of 50-year storm engineering standards. Seems like 100-year storms are happening more and more and more frequently. No longer have to wait 100 years for one of these events to happen. And that might be a better standard to design to. And in terms of protecting, getting back to 2.4.5, in terms of protecting the gulches themselves, as was mentioned by David Dorn and some comments here, I think a 100-foot buffer from top of bank would be preferable. And so those are my comments.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions? Daniel?
Hello, Doug.
Hi.
Did you say you're testifying on behalf of Maui Tomorrow?
I'm in agreement with their submitted comments.
Okay, so you mentioned Lucienne Dene's written testimony about adding a number of additional gulches.
Correct.
Is that included in the Maui Tomorrow?
Yes, it is.
2.4.5?
Yes, it is.
Oh, those gulches.
Yeah, those additional gulches are included.
Any further clarifying questions? Thank you. Next testifier.
I don't want to bring this group down any further. I'm Larry Stevens, testifying for myself. In fact, I want to raise your sights up the mountain today. I just had the opportunity to visit the Kula Botanical Garden today. I don't know if any of you have been up there. It's a beautiful little 8 acres of all kinds of native and non-native plants. Lovely place. They got hit really hard in the storm at the end of 2021. They had to pull 200 dump trucks of dirt out of their 8 acres. Fortunately, they had a retention basin there. They thought it was a koi pond, but they learned otherwise. And if we just focus our attention down here on our wetlands, on the Pi'ilani Highway, on the bottom end of the gulches, we're never going to fix anything. We have got to look up to the top and deal with the deer and deal with all the other devastation that's happening up there. Nothing we do down here is going to touch that. We are still going to get inundated time after time after time until we get control of the deer and until we address all the other issues that are the root cause of what's happening. Whether we build another hotel or not, it's not going to make any difference to the deer. And as long as the deer are in charge, we are going to pay and pay and pay. So thank you.
Any clarifying questions? Thank you. Next testifier.
Thank you, Clara Pun. When I read through the material that you created, I did not see the springs and the underground water flow mentioned. I noticed that it was in the presentation tonight, and I was very happy to see that in the presentation they thought it was very important as the part of the system to push the salt water out and to preserve the fresh water that we have here on land. And I wish you would look through your the introduction statements and the statements that you already made, and include the underground water flow as well as springs. You know, springs were so important. One of my gurus said that most heiau have a spring either under it or next to it. And that shows the importance that they held in our culture, and I think it's a logical importance, but at the same time, it is not really regarded that way when you're talking development. Underground water flows and springs that existed before, that should be existing now, the kind of the bloodline of the fresh water system under the earth. I hope that you will look at it again. I'm sorry I couldn't provide you with the language myself, but I think it's fairly easy to add that in. And I just want to say that we ever look at the places where we put all these culverts and culvertized streams and the gulches. I'm not to be a stickler, but I mean, at the Grand Wailea, there are 5 streams that were culvertized on that little 30-acre piece. You know, and then we wonder why we can't seem to get ahead of the toxic poisoning, the toxic levels at the beach. So I think for the planning department, it would be for them to look at the public works department, to look at what has been built already, and to have a real assessment of the drainage system, which I'm sure they're going to do more of, but perhaps you would like to require them to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Joe has a question?
Sorry, just a real quick comment. Your observation over here. Hello, Anthony. Thank you for coming and testifying again. So your comment about the heiau being built on or near these type of scenarios with the underground streams. I just want to make a quick comment that in Ma'alaya, there was a large heiau at once upon a time that was built on or near Kapoli Stream, which was a prominent underground stream, and both no longer exist due to human interference. So, mahalo.
Mahalo, and thank you for providing that knowledge.
Other clarifying questions? Cody?
Hello, Auntie. So do you think there is a distinction between gulches, waterways, retention areas in your manao, do you think there's a distinction between those terms?
You know, in previous testimony, I've heard how it was important only to think about the big gulches and not the tributary ones. And I think that all of it is a system meant to spread the water over the land. So I would say that the size may be different, and that when you're talking about retention areas, I think, I mean, I'm not an expert at all, but I believe that the retention area is meant to hold the water, slow it down, spread it out. And for us, I think traditionally is to spread it out on the land. You know, I recently saw something that I thought was really cool up in McKenna, and that was like 2 stone walls that were maybe about 6 feet apart and coming down, and they didn't look like they were a house lot or something like that. And I asked what it was, and he said that was to channel the water so that the water would be spread out over this area. And so I believe that when you're talking about protecting the gulches, putting a retention area into it that is not natural, where I've seen where they blasted retention areas into gulches, I don't think that serves exactly the same purpose. And I may be wrong, but the thought of what was presented tonight and what Robin Knox talked about is the slowing down, the spreading out, the holding it on the land. So,
any further clarifying questions? Thank you. And next testifier. Okay, looks like we are done with public testimony for today. And we will take a 10-minute break and then continue. Sorry.
Close testimony. Close it.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so I'm closing testimony at 7:09 p.m.
Before you get all mixed up. Yeah, yeah. Got it worked out. Well, it's good, done, huh? Karen, it's good, done, right?
Yeah, he logged off.
Disappeared into his box.
He was just like, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think he couldn't even hear what was going on.
You know, I think that lady thought because they were getting into discussion, during the discussion, I was going to say it.
Exactly.
So I told Joy when I saw she was joining her testimony, she said, what do you think? I said, well, all these complaints have to do with administrative enforcement and implementation.
They can do the actions tonight, but it's on the agenda as well.
Well, but what she was talking about is who's going to do this and who's going to do that, and that's administrative issues. It's not for this body to
decide who's going to do it. Just so you guys know exactly what I'm saying, it's actually not going to be gulches. We need gulches that we can policy. And I know that happened in the last week.
I think the reason that was because of the table, because last time he's trying to put my reaction to this. It's like the one that's over there now, trying to exclude that. So we put every gulch in something.
Which is funny because that one isn't even in there, and every gulch is even saying something that's not even.
Not even on there. It's probably man-made. You know, if you look at where it's at,
There's probably like retention fences.
yeah, does it? I walk through that place lots of times. I go for just for talks tonight. It's not that big, but it also doesn't feel like a natural gulch. But I was gonna, I know I didn't have enough time because you're so excited. But talking about natural, nature-based solutions. A perfect example is a few decades ago, the Roberts one. Housing development. So engineers got together and dug a giant ditch, thinking, okay, as it flows in, it will go like this. Well, it went down the ditch and back the other side, and it kept going straight to the ocean.
Like,
so
that's not
you can't really mess with nature's going to get you one way or the other, and that's what all this flooding is. It's saying, this is what you guys are in my way. I'm going to flow this way anyway, and it messed up all the areas where it could have been stopped or absorbed. And so yeah, it's on us. Yeah.
Just so that they're used to it. And anything I say is going to be just so that more there is some language you guys suggested. Like that's not.
Well, I think that I think that suggestion about defining the weapons and the things because we were looking at this. It says as define the weapons.
That was how it was.
So that's the part that was in there because we didn't have a compass.
Because you did. So Jordan said take project, that's fine because we have a name that's
Yeah. So Larry's going to take it out. So we have so we don't, somebody tried to put it back in, but they put it back in, like, I said, well, we put it back in, so we're going to look at it.
That's why I'm going by the county ordinance.
Yeah.
The only thing is, the county ordinance changes.
Yeah.
It could be supported.
Well,
sometimes I understand. But the longer the policies are, it's like as a planner, it has to be policy. Like it's hard when, especially if you don't have enough time for understand. It's policies, but it's like a paradigm. It's like, how am I going to digest this?
Yeah. Oh, I get that. I mean, they were, Lucienne wanted to put in the actual definition of what from the ordinance.
Changed it.
Well, you could do that, but then the ordinance is going to override.
If you have the definition.
If you have the definition in the plan, then it's okay. Because if we put the definition in the plan, it's all override. Okay, here's the definition for self-housing.
I don't know about that, because I have to double check that. But that is where it does in the SMA and in the subdivision. For everything else, the SMA the SMA or new yeah, that's why I didn't reach out to the but
Great, thank
good to
you.
see you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Bye.
Let's find our seats so we can start meeting again. Committee members, please find your seat.
Thank you, Tom. You went to check the flooding. Oh, good. Okay.
Okay, resuming the meeting.
Well, he's not watching. And
Not sure, did we lose our speakers?
maybe I'll.
Did we lose our speakers?
We logged off.
Is that?
We logged off.
We logged off, okay.
A while ago.
Yeah. Okay, so we have on the agenda to work on the actions of for wetland management, but an issue has come up with 2.4.1 with how it's been rendered, and so I'd like to hear if there's anyone who would like to make a motion to reopen 2.4.1 policy.
This one you guys did change because of the recent wetlands bill. Just as a reminder.
I'm sorry, that's my mistake. 2.4.5, right?
What's the number again?
2.4.5.
On that one, I would not recommend naming all the gulches. It actually weakens the policy to have everything named. For one thing, if there's a spelling error, then maybe we're going to name a gulch that doesn't exist.
First we need to decide if we're going to reopen it though. Someone needs to make a motion. Can't be me.
I motion that we reopen 2.4.5.
Is there a second? Second by Gilkey. Okay, Tova, you're the one who's put the most work into this by far. Could you tell us what your thinking is right now about 2.4.5?
It might not be perfect, but with the help of the planning department, I have a proposed different set of language that divides out where redevelopment would happen and new development would happen, and it allows for a separation. We're restoring the part where we talked about the 100 feet from the top of the bank, because that was the intent, was those protections would be in place and not diluted by being just down in the inundation zone, lower down. So the part B of that includes that section. And in addition, based on the DAR streams layer map, some additional named drainages have been added. So I would like to motion for adoption of that modified language.
If you are going to name the streams, I would, instead of especially, I would put including but not limited to.
Including but not limited to. Yes, so before it starts with Matalaya added in blue, including but not limited to. But I would need a second.
sejFhTQRXNMNfVMMGkRat. Did you second? Okay, does everybody have the text in front of them so we can talk about this? So, Cody?
Sorry, I can't find it right now, but is this address the 100-foot buffer as well that we're talking about? Is that language change?
Why don't you just read the whole thing, Tova, so we know what we're talking about.
For redevelopment, gulches and drainage ways as identified in the map in figure 3.5, page 106 of the plan, must remain an open space and no new permanent structures may be developed in or within 100 feet of the top of the bank of identified gulches and drainage ways unless low-impact development strategies are implemented to prevent stormwater runoff, especially in Ma'alaya, Kanayo, Pohakea, Waikapu, Waiakoa, Kalaniakoi, Waipuilani, Waimahai, Lili o Holo, Kiavikapu, Wailea, Kamaole, and Kapunakea.
And you recently just amended the including but not limited to, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Instead of especially included but not limited to, very good point. And then there's a second part to all of this. Have you since found it? Which is for new developments. It removes the exception for LID and has an exception for public bridge crossings and utilities. So that effectively removes the concern that by having public roads, you could have the whole area filled, the whole open space could be filled in with a road otherwise, which I don't think was the intent of what we talked about. We talked about really protecting those spaces as a buffer, but acknowledged crossings might be necessary to enable things like the north-south collector or other future escape routes out of South Maui.
So just FYI, I've been trying to figure this out and talking a lot to Michael Reyes, who spent a lot of time working on the wetlands ordinance, which also affects this because it talks about a 50-foot buffer. And my first reading of the definition by the Army Corps of Engineers is that it has to do with wetlands, but the definition actually is different for wetlands and for streams. So there are different ways to identify them. So the way it works is that any gulch or stream, anything that can lead water, which can be shown to be linked and eventually lead to the ocean, is covered and is protected. And by the wetlands ordinance, it's protected with at least a 50-foot buffer, and in some cases 200 foot, depending on what's going to be deployed near it. What was I going to say? Oh, and the other thing which is important to know is that who decides where these gulches are, which are the gulches. So the county has commissioned H.D. Harvey to investigate that, to do a survey. And they're expected to produce this late fall, maybe October. And that will be the draft, at least, of what streams are considered connected in some way, and so protected by the wetlands ordinance. Now, some people might say, if there already is protection, why are we adopting additional language here? But I think there is a good reason, and that is that we're asking for additional protection, 100-foot protection of known streams, which go all the way from Mauka to Makai. These are the ones which are known to be connected and pose a direct threat to South Maui in terms of flooding. So this is not in contradiction to or instead of the wetlands ordinance. This is additional protection. That's how I see it.
So would that mean it's 150 foot then? If you said one is 50 and then adding the additional 100, is that what?
No, it would mean that any gulch which is found to be connected one way or another, would have 50-foot buffer. But these particular ones, which are listed, would have a 100-foot buffer. If we adopt this language.
And then was just for the second part of also including but not limited to, same as the first recommendation. So just yeah, recommend that.
Further discussion, questions? Does everyone have the, okay, good, it's on the screen, okay. Good. So I think this is a good solution in that it doesn't conflict with good work that has been done to compose the weapons ordinance and map it. Vernon?
Thank you, Chair. So reading the Maui tomorrow comments. Just want to make sure I'm reading this right. It's kind of tied into what Kobe told us presented or suggested. .4.5. It's the ticker packet. Looks like you guys know final yet. No, so I just reading the other testimonies. The way I translating it, it's just want to make sure that, I mean, it looks pretty much what you're sharing. Yeah? If anybody want to check that box, just in case.
I think it's actually this language is a little bit stronger because it makes fewer exceptions and goes from 50 to 100.
Okay.
What?
I have a question. So, Tova, in regards to what Karen from the planning department had responded back to you, could you tell me, and I'm sorry for repeating this, so they had recommended for the new development subdivisions paragraph, they had used with the exception of public roadways, and you had said with the exception of public bridge crossings. Could you explain to me what the difference is?
Sure thing. So when we first passed this a couple of weeks ago, in my mind, we were creating a buffer along those gulches. For all the reasons we've talked about, it's really important. And I realized the way the language was written with the exception of roads, those roads in my mind just connected me and Kyoki. It wasn't running along the edge of the gulch. And so the reason I wanted to change the language to make the exception of bridges was to eliminate the possibility that instead of using those as open corridor buffers that are important, they became just places for the roads. So it's tightening up the language so there are true buffer protections, but not eliminating the need for us to be able to connect north to south as we've heard again and again.
So maybe I ask Karen this. So, but you folks, you agree with that? Public roadways, bridges, fine. And then it's a drivable bridge, right? I just have to ask. Okay, thank you.
So to Bruno's question, there is a difference. And there's a difference between what Maui Tomorrow is proposing and the language we have up on the screen there. And I should add too that I did ask Karen if it's possible to add the resolved additional gulches that Lucian identified to the map and to the actually. Back. Sorry, that was a different question. Jennifer.
I have a question too. So some of these gulches, or at least one, is in a residential area. So for redevelopment, if a home gets washed away, or part of a home, are they not allowed to rebuild their home? And do we need to put something to address that? Do you see where I'm going with this buffer and being so strict with your language? Or am I missing a point here? Is there something is there a policy that covers this?
That's why it's separated out for redevelopment, so you can have the low impact development strategies. A home would be being redeveloped.
Everett?
Just continuing on that line of thought, you're in Maui Meadows. A house burns down. Doesn't have to be a flood, it burns down. And can you redevelop it? I think this is excessive. I think this is extremely excessive.
Cody?
In my thoughts, I'm thinking if you're living in an area and the water washes your house away, then wouldn't it have the potential of doing that again?
Good point. So there you go. You have to maintain the gulch, right? So what are we doing with the gulches as well? Like it's another issue. Like Vernon was saying, you got to go north. You got to look at where the source is coming from. I think. Just a thought.
Okay, wait, so the house there next to the gulch, right? The water come down, the house get washed away, and then the question is, can the homeowner redevelop in that same place? Yeah, just like Tornado Alley. The house gone, they build again. The house gone, build again. For me, I gotta relocate or something, knowing that it's going to rain this weekend, kind of thing. So, yeah, it's, I wouldn't build back again, knowing what would happen. I mean, that's just me. Yeah.
Right.
So I think, Edward, you bring up a really good comment, because we're talking about, I think there is some logic if it's a flood from water, that seems a little silly. But to your point, that if it's a different cause of something coming down, so I think we need to be careful that we're looking at all aspects, and it's not just the flood took it away. That if for some reason trees fell on the house, are we going to say you can't rebuild because it didn't get destroyed potentially due to a flood? Hurricane. Right, hurricane. Yeah. So I think it's interesting. I didn't think from that angle, but I think that's something we do need to take into account so that we're not boxing things into such a degree. I don't know how to fix that, but good.
So it does say no new permanent structures be developed.
I just had a clarifying question for planning. In the event of some of these disaster scenarios, we've talked in the past how exceptions are granted. would those be the kind of thing where this isn't actually, I mean, the intention of this is not to stop people from responding to an emergency that's happened to them. The purpose of this is to not continue to create a situation where we have $1 million flood happening every time Waiakoa happens in one thing. I mean, we don't want that. So would this be one of those cases where an exception could be sought, and so it's okay to hold it for the purpose, but know that we're not hurting anyone in the long run who needs to respond to an emergency?
That's the reason that redevelopment was separated out, because it's not prohibiting development. It's just saying you can't use standard development practices in those areas. You're redeveloping in a waterway. You should probably be using low impact development standards anyway. This isn't saying if your house catches on fire you can't develop. That's the reason for separating the policies, so that you can say new development, we're going to be stricter. Older development, it's already there. They do have some development rights.
Any comment? Question, Cody? Okay. So how are we doing with? I haven't heard any proposals for changes in the text on the screen. And we have a motion. And see, we have a second? Yes, we have a second. Okay. Are we ready to go to a decision? Any objections to the text? Ever objects? Okay, so we'll take a vote. Those in favor of the revised 2.4.5 proposed by Tolman on the screen, please raise your hand. In favor. I guess Karen's taking it. You got it, Karen?
Sorry, 4 no's, and the rest yeses.
And those voting against?
Is Leifua, Jennifer, Brian, and Everett.
And those abstaining? Okay. So I find that the motion is passed. So, do we need to do anything more with the policies, or can we go on to the actions now? Is there any issues? Okay. Okay, first 4.01 action is implement the Maui Meadows subdivision drainage master plan. So I'm sure Daniel has a lot to say about this because he's been very much involved, but I read it, I browsed it, I didn't read it thoroughly, and it has small kind of improvements which are great, like roadside swales, modifications to driveways, regular debris cleanup. It also has a major plan for what to do seriously about the water, and it provides 3 options. And option 1 is to redirect the water south of Maui Meadows. And it says that we don't have any information about what is south of Maui Meadows. In other words, on the other side of the highway. So that would need to be investigated. The second one is, second option, option number 2, is to build out the culverts so that they can carry enough water for a 100-year flood. And then option number 3 is to build out all the culverts in case that's too expensive, so they can handle a 50-year flood. So those are basically the 3 major options in that drainage master plan. And I happen to know, because I've heard from people in Maui Meadows, that there is a study commission to come up with Amanda Fording's company, Eco Solutions, to come up with an alternative, because that's not very popular to just dump all the water south of on the Makai of Pi'ilani Highway, or to just build all these additional culverts. So I'm kind of skeptical to that plan at this point. And then also the cost, just so you know, the cost according to the plan for option 1, the diversion, is $34 million. The cost for option 2 is $12.5 million. And the cost for option 3 is $11.3 million. This is according to the plan. So in many ways, it's similar to the Kihei Drainage Master Plan, in the way of thinking. Hang on.
So really, it is a companion to the Kihei Drainage Master Plan. That's why it looks so similar. The 3 recommendations is what Rob stated. We had a presentation by Eco Solutions at the Maui Meadows Neighborhood Association annual meeting, and most of their solutions are Mauka of Maui Meadows, not within the subdivision. And they're great. I mean, they're pretty similar to what we heard from Daniel Hayes Housing. Very, very similar. So as far as implementing the Maui Meadows Subdivision Drainage Master Plan, there is those 3 recommendations. I think the one that will be least liked, well, I can't say that, but speaking for myself, I don't think diverting the water above Maui Meadows and shunting it somewhere else in open land is the key, because there's a value to having water going down its natural course. There's a value to that, because it will help recharge the aquifer. Of course, below Pi'ilani Highway, the natural course of the waterway has been changed for Wailea Resort, and doesn't follow necessarily the natural waterway